For those of you who don't know, goat's milk is naturally homogeneous. That means that the cream and the skim milk pretty much never separate. They do the tiniest little bit. Like you can skim off with a spoon if you let the milk sit for a few days, but you can't get nearly the amount of cream off of goat's milk that you'd be able to off of cow's milk, just dipping a spoon or a ladle into the milk after a few days. So we have a really nice cream separator, and usually I will try to separate out about 2 to 4 gallons at one time. I've got to heat the milk up on the stove to 100 degrees and run it through the cream separator, and it does a fantastic job. We only milk out about 3/4 of a gallon a day from our goats, so I've combined a few days worth of milking when I go to separate the cream. So I want to make sure that when I'm putting the skim milk back away, that I am using the same jar for the oldest milk that I've used in all of the combined milk. So the oldest milk in this batch is from the 13th. So when I return the milk back to the refrigerator, I'm making sure that I am using the same bottles that are labeled for the 13th. So I know that the milk contains milk from that oldest date. Hope that makes sense. You can use the skim milk for a bunch of things. I know you can use it to make clabber cheese, which is what I am doing here. And just for your information, a Weck jar large lid fits on a gallon-sized ball jar like a glove. We've allowed this cream to chill overnight, and as you can see, it is very, very thick. This is the thickest cream that I've ever made. There are settings on my cream separator to have the cream come out more thick or more thin. I was laughing in amazement and thinking there's no way we're going to be able to shake or whip this into butter, but we did have success. Though this little butter churn that Addison is using right now, I did end up overfilling and she had a hard time. I ended up taking over, and I think the next time that we go to make butter with that cute little butter churn, we will fill it to the 300 mLs that the pamphlet recommends. My husband Levi is using the method that we have been using prior to buying the butter churn to make butter. You fill a mason jar halfway up with cream and shake until your heart's content. Here I'm showing you that this is not the end point. You may think you have butter once your cream becomes this thick. Not quite. You've got to continue shaking until that really, really thick cream separates into buttermilk and butter. And once you get that cream to break, continue shaking for another minute just to ensure that you've got it all whipped up into beautiful butter. Addison got tired here, and Levi did manage to get butter. I'll show you what that butter and buttermilk looks like in just a minute. We had to put extra elbow grease in because, like I said, I overfilled the butter churn, but alas, we did end up having success at the end. This is the point where we've got butter and buttermilk. I'm just cranking it out for another few turns to make sure that we're good. Here's the final result. Our butter and our buttermilk all in the jar. I like to use a fine mesh sieve to separate the buttermilk from the butter. You want to do the best you can to get as much buttermilk out of the butter as you can, because it will help keep the shelf life of your butter. If you leave a little bit of buttermilk mixed in with the butter, it just makes it not last as long on the counter or in the refrigerator. Definitely save the buttermilk. You can use it for worlds of uses, including, and of course, buttermilk pancakes. So, in order to ensure that we've got most of the buttermilk out of the butter, most if not all, we're going to be rinsing the butter with cold water. Make sure you use cold water here because you don't want to melt the butter. You want it to keep its solidity, but you want to rinse off and wash out as much buttermilk as you can. You might not be able to remove all of it, but do your best. Here it took me about 3 rinses to get nice clear water, and I'll show you that here. Make sure you're mixing the butter around to get all of the buttermilk out. It's going to be all throughout that nice pat of butter, and you want to work all of that out. This is my 3rd rinse where I feel comfortable that I've gotten as much buttermilk out of the butter as I can. So I'm going to rinse out the rest of the water and put the butter away until molding time, which is in the morning. Ah, yes, but don't forget salt. If you prefer salted butter, I do about a teaspoon of the pink Himalayan salt per pound. I know that I have 1 pound 5 ounces of butter here because I weighed it out. So I did a little bit more than 1 teaspoon. Make sure you mix it in really well and taste it to make sure it is to your liking. Okay, it's the next morning. Make sure you leave your butter out on the counter. You can do this immediately after salting. I just wanted to go to bed the night before. So I've got my butter. It is beautiful. And I'm going to take my spatula and wedge it into my butter mold. I try my hardest to get the butter and wedge it straight into the corners of the butter mold. It's really, really hard to get it exactly in the edge of the butter mold, but I try. Also, and of course, molding your butter isn't necessary. It just makes it easy for me to portion out when I'm cooking, and it stores nicely in the freezer. I'll show you how I do that momentarily. And here we are, nicely molded butter. I've got a lid that I'm going to snap onto this, and I will now stick it in the refrigerator and let it harden up. Here we have 4 beautiful sticks, 1 pound of homemade goat's cream butter. I like to store my butter in vacuum seal bags in the freezer. You can definitely freeze butter, and I recommend doing so if you can't get to your butter within a week or 2. Vacuum sealing isn't necessary. I just have the vacuum sealer and I like using it. As always, make sure you label things properly. I write down what is in the bag and the month with the year and call that good. Job well done. Now it's time to get the milking stuff and milk the girls and start the process all over again. Have a good one, guys.